Welcome back, guys. Today we'll be finding the product of two 3 by 3 matrix and finding the inverse of A. If A is equal to 1, 2, -1, -1, 2, 1, 1 minus 2 and 3, and B is equal to 2, -1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. Now find AB, then deduce A inverse. So for this matrix, A is considered to be a 3 by 3. We have 3 rows. This is 1, 2, 3 rows, and we have 3 columns. Because we have the same amount of rows and columns, it's considered to be a square matrix. The same for B. We have 3 rows and 3 columns. So this is also a square matrix. First, we're asked to find AB. When you have two matrices side by side, it's telling us to multiply. So let's look at part 1. So to find AB, I am going to set the matrix side by side. So A is 1, 2, -1, -1, 2, 1, 1, -2, and 3. Matrix B is 2, -1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. Now I don't have to check if I can multiply because both of them is of the same order and it's a square matrix. And remember, what do we mean by is it defined? Since the first matrix is a 3 by 3 and the second matrix is a 3 by 3. Once the rows and columns within are the same, it's considered to be defined, and the outer part tells us the order that we should get when we multiply. So this is saying we are going to get a 3 by 3 matrix. Now when we're multiplying, we divide the first matrix into 3 rows and the second matrix into 3 columns. So multiplying this, I'm going to multiply the first row by the first column. So multiplying row 1 by column 1, I'm going to say 1 times 2, that's 2. Then 2 times 1, that's 2, so I have plus 2. -1 times 0, that's 0. So I repeat the first row by the first column. So 1 times 2, that's 2. 2 times 1, that gives me 2. And -1 times 0, that's 0. Next, I'll be multiplying the first row by the second column. So we have 1 times -1, that gives me -1. Then 2 times 1, that's 2, so I'm going to write plus 2. Now -1 times 1, that's -1, so I'll write -1. So if this was 1 times 1, that would be +1, so that means I would have written plus 1 here. So row 1 times column 2, I have 1 times -1, that's -1. 2 times 1, that's +2. So I have my plus 2, and -1 times 1, that's -1. Now I'm going to multiply the first row by the last column. So we have 1 times 1, that's 1. Then 2 times 0, that's 0. So I'm just going to write plus 0. Then -1 times 1, that's -1. I repeat. First row by the last column, 1 times 1, that's 1. 2 times 0, that's 0. And -1 times 1, that's -1. Now I'm going to move to the second row. So we're going to multiply the second row by the first column, then the second column, then the third column. So let's start with the first column. So the second row multiplied by the first column. So we have -1 times 2, that's -2. Then 2 times 1, that's 2, so I have plus 2. And 1 times 0, that's 0. So I have plus 0. Second row by the second column. So negative 1 times negative 1, that's positive 1. 2 times 1, that's 2. And then 1 times 1, that's 1. I repeat. Second row by the first column, negative 1 times 2, that's minus 2. 2 times 1, that's 2. And 1 times 0, that's 0. Second row times the second column, so I have negative 1 times negative 1, that's positive 1. 2 times 1, that's 2. And 1 times 1, that's 1. Now we're going to multiply the second row by the last column. Negative 1 times 1, that's negative 1. Then 2 times 0, that's 0. And then 1 times 1, that's 1. So the second row by the last column, negative 1 times 1, negative 1. 2 times 0, that's 0. And 1 times 1, since it's positive 1, I will have plus 1 here. Now to move to the last row. The last row will be multiplied with the first column, second column, and the third column. The last row multiplied with the first column, I will have 1 times 2, that's 2. Minus 2 times 1, that's minus 2, so I put my minus 2. And 3 times 0, that's 0. So repeating this, 1 times 2, that's 2. Negative 2 times 1, that's minus 2. And 3 times 0, that's 0. Now, the third row by the second column. So we have 1 times negative 1, that's minus 1. Then minus 2 times 1, that's minus 2. And then 3 times 1, that's positive 3. So I repeat, last row by the second column, 1 times minus 1, that's minus 1. Minus 2 times 1, that's negative 2. And 3 times 1, that's 3. Finally, we have the last row by the last column. So 1 times 1, that's 1. Minus 2 times 0, that's 0. And then we have 3 times 1, that's 3. So 1 times 1, that's 1. Minus 2 times 0, that's 0. And 3 times 1, that's 3. So 2 plus 2, that's 4 plus 0. So I'll have a 4 here. Minus 2 plus 2, that's 0 plus 0. Then 2 minus 2, that's 0 plus 0, that's 0. Minus 1 plus 2, that's 1. Minus 1, that's 0. 1 plus 2, that's 3. And 3 plus 1, that's 4. Minus 1 minus 2, that's minus 3. And minus 3 plus 3, that's 0. 1 plus 0, that's 1. Minus 1, that's 0. Minus 1 plus 0, that's minus 1. Plus 1, that's 0. 1 plus 0, 1. Plus 3, that's 4. So right here, this represents the product AB. Deduce A inverse. We don't have to go through the procedure of finding the A inverse. We could use the information from part 1 to determine A inverse easily. Now looking at this, we have AB is equal to, now if you realize 4 is common right here, the diagonal has 4, we can factor out the 4 and we get the 3 by 3 identity, which is 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 1. So if you look at this, I can factor out 4, and here this becomes 1 because I factored it out. So this becomes the identity. So what is this AB telling me? Remember, AB product is this, and I factored 4 to get 4 times the identity. So from part 1, we have that AB is equal to 4 times the identity, because the identity for a 3 by 3 is this 100,010,001. So AB is equal to 4 times its identity. No. If I carry A over the equal sign, it becomes the inverse. So I will have B is equal to 4I times the inverse. That's what I have. Now, if I multiply a matrix by the inverse, or when the identity multiplied by the inverse, it gives us A inverse. If I multiply the identity times B, I will get B. If I multiply the identity times a matrix A, I'll get A. Identity means that when we have a matrix being multiplied by its identity, we will get the matrix that is being multiplied. So carrying this A over the equal sign, it becomes A inverse, but I times A inverse will give me A inverse. Now, if I divide both sides by 4, because the question is asking what is A inverse, this cancels. So A inverse is equal to B over 4. And B over 4 is the same thing as me saying a quarter times B. What is B? B is the matrix that we have here. So therefore, A inverse is equal to a quarter times 2 negative 1 1 1 1 0 0 1 1, and that's the inverse. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Have a great day, and if you have more questions, please leave a comment below.